to the Donkey Breed Society Eastern region for inviting me to speak. So let me ask you a question. What do you think is the largest organ in the donkey body? You'd be forgiven for saying it's the brain. We all know donkeys are super clever. They can open gates, unlock doors, steal yard brushes, get anything out of the smallest pocket, and they can read your mind and tell the time without a clock. But actually, the largest organ is the skin, and it's way more than just a means of containing all those internal organs. So today we'll have a quick look at the functions of the skin, what may be living in or on your donkey's skin, how the condition of the skin can give us clues as to disease elsewhere in the body, and how we can deal with some common problems associated with this very large and very visible organ. And most of what I say also applies to mules, horses, and zebras. And that's the thing, isn't it? The skin is visible to us, so it's very much up to us to keep an eye and a hand on it. What better for you and your donkeys than a quick all-over stroke every day? It needs only take a couple of minutes, and it's so worth it. And don't forget the maneuver I like to call the genital grope. This is perfectly legal between you and a donkey. And seriously, it's vital to identify any early signs of potential skin cancers, which so often occur around the udder, scrotum, prepuce, and the perineal area under the tail. Do this every day so it becomes completely routine, and that way, should the vet have to do the same, the donkey should be fear-free and compliant. Warm hands are recommended though. Early detection of a problem can literally be life-saving. And what else do you need in your toolkit for skin problems? We've already mentioned hands, but you also need your eyes, a camera, and to invest in a piece of high-tech equipment costing just £1. More of that later. And as Carol said, there are a couple of slides that you might want to screenshot as we go through. So let's just run through the functions of the skin. Well, it protects the inside from the outside, of course. As soon as that protection is breached, with even the tiniest wound, it leaves the donkey exposed to all sorts of infections, some of which can be fatal, such as the bacteria that causes tetanus. The skin is exquisitely sensitive, filled with nerve endings such that it can detect the lightest of flies landing on it and respond with the characteristic skin twitch, which we call the paniculus response, and which we humans cannot do. It can also tell the brain about heat, cold, pressure, and pain. And just while we're talking about sensitivity, I hope you all know that the whiskers and those long hairs around the eyes are there for a reason. Their technical name is vibrissae, and they're an essential part of the sensory system that horses and donkeys use all the time and should never ever be shaved or cut in any way. I know there's a temptation to trim that really long one beneath the eye, but it's there for a reason and should never be tampered with. Just so you know, whisker clipping was actually banned back in 1998 in Germany, but only from July this year in the UK. I gather the Donkey Breed Society is way ahead of the game in that they ban admission to shows if donkeys have been mutilated in this way. The skin is full of cells that have an immune function and mount an immune response as a reaction to some things that the body considers to be harmful. The picture on this slide is of a donkey's neck where an array of potential antigens, such as the saliva of midges or pollen, have been injected to see if the donkey mounts an immune reaction, which manifests as swelling and soreness. This sort of testing can also be used to test for food allergies. So the skin is acting as a sentinel for an allergic response, but it can also tell us about some systemic diseases that donkeys suffer, as we'll see. The skin is responsible for ensuring the donkey gets enough essential vitamin D. We'll have a look at temperature regulation, and of course the skin itself is waterproof, but is the hair coat? So now let's look at a few of these in more detail. What can go wrong with this huge body organ? As you can see from this list, many afflictions are caused by other organisms, both external and internal. Allergic responses are not uncommon, and just like us, donkeys can suffer from autoimmune disease, where the body is effectively starting to attack itself, and which manifest as sore, crusting lesions and vesicles. I'll not have time to talk about this tonight, though. And we've just mentioned how the weather can affect our donkeys. You will all have heard of sarcoids, but I'm going to use the term cancer because sarcoids and melanomas are cancers. That's how serious they are. The skin can point us to liver disease. Some chemicals that the liver can't detoxify because it's no longer functioning properly can cause the skin to be super sensitive to the effects of the sun, a condition called photosensitization. And this leads to painful sunburn, mainly on the white bits of animals, where there's no melanin pigment in the skin to keep out the sun's rays. The piebald horse in the middle picture illustrates this perfectly, as does the bullock with severe photosensitization of its white patches, and a horse's nose with the same problem. Common things being common, ragwort poisoning is often the culprit. But other plants such as tansy, groundsel, buckwheat and St. John's wort can cause this ultra-sensitivity to sunlight, as can things like molds in hay. And just so you know, a donkey that is itchy and all other things have been ruled out, well, just think liver and call the vet in. He can tell an awful lot just by a blood sample, and in my experience, the itchy donkey without obvious reason may have a compromised liver. Here's the skin, or at least the hair coat, telling us that something is going wrong inside, in this case, a brain disease. On the left, we have a typical case of Cushing's disease in a pony, and you can see the curliness of the coat. The donkey too has Cushing's. It doesn't always get the curly coat, but the coat can get sparse and look generally unkempt. The shape change here is a giveaway. We all need vitamin D, and like us, the donkey skin is responsible for converting a precursor of the vitamin into vitamin D itself. So sunbathing really does have a biological reason. And I'm sure most of you will agree that donkeys are really very good at it. Just bear in mind that even the healthiest of donkeys can get sunburn if they have pink skin, usually on the muzzle area and around the eyes. A high-factor, non-perfumed sun cream is ideal to rub on every day in the sunny weather, and then just watch in frustration as the donkey rubs his muzzle along the ground to remove it all. It's worth a try though, or go for a face mask that includes a nose piece. Now, most of you will know that donkeys on the whole don't like the rain, and they certainly don't like cold, windy, rainy conditions. They really need effective shelter, including overhead shelter, to cope with the weather in the UK. However, until recently, there was no scientific evidence of this. And believe me, this sort of evidence was desperately needed to improve donkey welfare from a legal point of view. Without the benefit of science, it was very difficult to enforce welfare regulations when necessary. A fairly high-profile welfare legal case really brought this home, and the result was that two scientific groups carried out a study of the behavioural preferences of donkeys in various weather conditions, and one on how the coat changes with the seasons. I've put the links up here, but I can tell you that we now have scientific proof that donkeys have a need for shelter in wet and cold conditions, and their coat does not effectively become a warm and waterproof one in the winter. Science confirming what we already knew, but now that science can be used to inform enforcers. Donkeys are so different to our native ponies. Just bear in mind that the donkey is a desert animal and has only been here for around 2,000 years, which is no time at all in an evolutionary sense. They simply haven't had time to adapt to our climate, so we need to help them out by providing really effective shelter that they have free access to all the time. And just in case anybody would like to read more of the law, here are the bits you need to look at. This may be useful for any of you who are involved with education. This particular act relates to England and Wales, but there is equivalent legislation in Scotland and Northern Ireland. So let's move on to sweet itch. This is allergies and insects rolled into one, a horrible condition, and is a result of a donkey being allergic to the saliva of the biting midge called Coriotis. The midge is active through the summer months, and with climate change, I think the midge season is actually getting longer. At least 7 months of constant itch. Can you imagine it? Mainly affecting the mane and tail, and apart from causing painful lesions that can then get infected by bacteria, it just wears these poor animals out. There have been several human studies that have shown that given a choice, people would rather experience frank pain than constant itchiness. Now, these midges don't live everywhere. They like an environment which is damp, so near water, woods, marshes, poorly draining soil, and they love a muck heap. They come out to do their worst at dawn and dusk, and they don't like wind. So what can you do? Well, choose the pasture carefully. Nowhere near the things that midges like. Somewhere high and windy is ideal. Consider keeping your donkeys in at dawn and dusk. And can you put a fan up in the shelter or stable? This can blow the midges and other flying insects away. Cover your donkey up. There are manufacturers that make rugs specifically to keep insects out. But have a look at the ones the horse is wearing. New research has told us that many flying insects don't like stripes because they get confused by them and therefore don't land. Do consult your vet, because in severe cases, some steroids may be needed to get the donkey over a severe attack. There are various insect repellents which vary in their effectiveness regionally. That dreaded resistance again that we talked about in the worming talks. Have a look at products containing DEET, benzyl benzoate and permethrin, cypermethrin and pyrethroids, but more of those later. And do be guided by your vet. And please, if you find something that works for you, do share that information. There is some evidence that nicotinamides can help alleviate the signs of sweet itch by strengthening the skin barrier. I can't prescribe, as your donkeys aren't under my care, but there is a nicotinamide nutraceutical which you can buy over the counter called Cavaless, excuse me, which you may like to Google. Just be aware that you need to start giving this at least a month before the midge season starts. And, very exciting, do ask your vet about the relatively new vaccine that is proving effective in reducing the very distressing signs of sweet itch. It's not cheap, but then nor is a special rug. If nothing works, I really think you should consider relocating your donkeys to an environment that's less favourable for midges, or the donkeys can face a lifetime of itch. Sweet itch is probably the most common allergic condition of donkeys and other equids, but a donkey can mount an allergic response to all sorts of things: nettles, molds in foods, food itself, drugs and pollens. This picture is a very dramatic one of an urticarial reaction to a new food, and you can see the poor animal is covered in wheals. These will dissipate, but you should consult your vet quickly. Now, mites seem born to cause donkeys distress. Flying ones, crawling ones, all as bad as each other. There are too many to go into in any detail, but bear in mind that even though they cannot live on you, they can use you as a taxi to get from one donkey to another. The picture on the top left is a horse with Coriotis or leg mites, typically affecting feathered horses, but I've seen them in many donkeys. This horse was clipped out for treatment, but clever him for finding a suitable scratching post. You can see how ghastly they are in the picture next to it. Top right is the mange mite, Sarcoids, and bottom right is the head of the Demodex mange mite looking right at you. And the little critter on the green background is a forage mite. All these mites can cause a donkey to itch, so he will of course scratch. The forage mite in particular seems to get into donkeys' heads when they're feeding from forage in a manger, and they bury their heads in it looking for the best bits at the bottom. So you may see a donkey with a lot of ball patches on its face where it's been scratching. Itching always leads to scratching, which leads to skin damage, which can result in bacterial invasion and all sorts of nasty resulting lesions, which may be pussy, bloody, or both, and may also be painful. Mites cause a lot of distress, but your vet should be able to get samples of the mites to identify them and offer treatment accordingly. In some cases, ivermectin wormer may be indicated. Bathing can help using a shampoo containing selenium sulfide that helps to break down the scurf which mites seem to be attracted to. We hate flies, and so do donkeys. Not only do they cause intense annoyance, but they can bite, spread disease, and absolutely wear out a donkey. As you know, they seem to be particularly attracted to the area around the eyes, the legs, and the genitals. And there's increasing evidence that flies can spread sarcoids in equids. But they do have one redeeming feature, which I'll show you in a bit. Flies love to lay their eggs in any wounds or wet poo on animals, such as rabbits and sheep. The gruesome picture on the top right is a sheep with severe fly strike that has literally been eaten alive by fly maggots. And fly strike can happen to donkeys too, so do check them all over every day. The donkey in the picture at the bottom right is probably completely protected from fly worry, but it does look a bit extreme. And this is actually a working donkey on a honey farm in his full PPE. Fly masks and fringes all have their place for our donkeys, and the mane is there for a reason. It helps to repel flies when it's shaken, so please don't hog it. Fly leg worry can be truly horrible, and the little fly bites can be intensely painful and get infected. If you have any ideas for protecting your donkeys, let's hear them. This is my very amateurish attempt to make donkey leggings out of a paper suit that cost about £1 when I was last at the Safe Haven Sanctuary in Israel. Just bear in mind that the strap that goes over the withers or rump to hold the leggings up needs to be wide enough so that it doesn't cut into the donkey's skin. In my experience, like stockings that were supposed to stay up without suspenders and always ended up around my ankles, donkey leggings without a shoulder strap tend to do the same. Human tubic grip can be used, but I think some flies can bite through it, and you cannot painlessly pull it up over an already sore leg. So it needs to be used preventatively rather than as a cure. What about a competition for the best designed leggings, Carol? Chemicals can be effective at stopping flies land in the first place. I'm not here to recommend particular products, as some fly populations have definitely built up resistance to them. So it's a matter of what works for you and your donkeys, and then sharing that information locally. Any hints and tips you can share would be really welcome. As I mentioned before, flying insects cannot withstand a draft, so do consider a fan in your donkey housing. Fly traps work very well in some cases, as do ultraviolet zappers, environmental insecticides, and biological control systems involving a parasitic wasp. Ask me about that at the end if you want to know more. There are, of course, products that you actually apply to your donkey, too many to mention, but the accepted chemicals for fly control, as I've mentioned before, DEET, pyrethrins, pyrethroids, and cypermethrin. Now, in the worming talk, I was asked about herbal remedies. Well, if that's what you're after, then you'll be glad to know that pyrethrins come from chrysanthemums. Permethrin and cypermethrin are simply synthetic versions of the same molecule found in the flower. Deosect is a product licensed for the prevention of fly worry and sweet itch in both horses and donkeys. It's not that pleasant to use, and do read the instructions regarding dilution, but I wouldn't dismiss that one. It's quite expensive, but because it needs to be very, very diluted, then it may be a good idea for a few of you to get together just to share one bottle and see if it works. And do shop around. Prices on various websites vary enormously. And here's just one example of a recipe that a donkey owner has used for many years and claims to be really effective. So feel free to screenshot that one or have a look at the recording when you want to. Donkeys, they just put up with everything, bless them. Have you ever seen crows pecking at your donkeys? Probably attracted to the scurf and maybe parasites that lurk on the donkey, and they certainly take the fur away, presumably to line their nests. However, if they break the skin, they keep pecking at the same place and can cause nasty wounds. Wounds made even nastier if they happen to be over the fat pad of an obese donkey, because they are notorious for never healing as they have a very poor blood supply. The picture at the bottom left is a typical bird peck. If this happens to your donkey, do cover the area, as the same birds will just keep coming back. An adhesive heavy-duty plaster is ideal, such as the one in the picture. Just make sure you put a swab over the wound itself, because this plaster will stick fast to anything, and you don't want it sticking to the lesion. I mentioned that flies are not all that bad, and the pictures on the right are a life-saving veterinary procedure on a donkey with a fat pad bird peck. The first picture shows the fat literally rotting and brown and inhibiting healing. And the second picture is a few days later, after medical-grade fly maggots were introduced into the wound. The great thing is that these maggots only eat dead and dying tissue. You can see that they aren't in the healthy part of the wound. So they very effectively debride the area, eating all the necrotic fat to allow for natural healing to occur. These maggots are specifically bred by a medical company and they're sterile, but it does make this a very expensive treatment. Let's have a quick look at just one example of what bacteria can do to the skin. Mud fever and rain scald should never really happen if we keep our donkeys dry. Chronically wet skin becomes macerated, and bugs such as Dermatophilus and Staphylococcus, which normally sit harmlessly on the surface, can penetrate the surface, resulting in pustules of infection and the tufted appearance of the coat. It's often described as a paintbrush appearance, and you can see a tuft in the person's hand in the picture on the left. Make no mistake, this can be intensely painful, especially on the lower limbs, so you will need to consult your vet to get some pain relief into the donkey. Gentle bathing with a very dilute solution of an antiseptic such as chlorhexidine, and I do mean dilute, 0.1%, can help. And because most of the bugs that cause this are anaerobes, that is, they don't like oxygen, then exposing the damaged tissue to the air can be really helpful. Your vet may prescribe an antiseptic cream and even systemic antibiotics in a severe case. Keep your donkeys dry. If you do rug them, take the rug off every day and check the condition of the skin before replacing. And do dispose of the hair tufts carefully, as they will be able to spread the bugs to other donkeys. A common virus affecting the skin is genital herpes, as you can see in the first two pictures. This is also called horsepox. It causes really painful lesions and it's spread by sexual contact. The other common one is warts, very common in youngsters, but they nearly always grow out of them and they just drop off in time. Keep a pictorial record of these in case they turn out to be something more sinister, like skin cancer. Ringworm is badly named as it's not caused by a worm and it doesn't always cause ring-shaped lesions. The donkey on the bottom left has a classic lesion, but the mule's flank in the middle is also ringworm, and so is the mule's eyelid lesion. It tends to be more true to its name in human infections, and I put this picture in to remind you that you can catch ringworm off your donkey. There's now a very quick lab test that can be done to confirm a diagnosis of ringworm. The ringworm fungus reproduces by producing spores, and these are incredibly resistant to chemicals. Burning stuff that's to be disposed of, such as bedding, and steam cleaning the shelter is recommended where possible. You can use a 1 in 10 solution of bleach. That's very effective and cheap, but you may not want to use this on some of your tack or your rugs. There is a shampoo that has fungicidal activity and a licensed veterinary product in the form of a wash that your vet will prescribe if necessary, but most cases of ringworm spontaneously resolve. Now let's look at how worms manifest as skin disease. I think the lesions like the one beneath the eye on the left are becoming more common in the UK. They're caused by the Habronema worm larvae that are carried by flies and get deposited on moist bits of skin, which attracts the flies. They can be found on any part of the body though, and are known as summer sores. The adult worm lives in the stomach of the donkey and really doesn't cause any issues. Thankfully, this is still susceptible to ivermectin. The neck threadworm is a really weird one. The adult worm is very long and lives in the neck ligaments, but the juvenile worms live in the skin and can make the donkey very itchy, commonly around the neck, but also the underbelly. They can also infest the eye, and I hope you can see that there's a worm in the eye picture in the middle of this slide. If your donkey is very itchy around the mane and neck area with lesions that look like sweet itch, but the back and tail area are not affected, it could just be this worm, so do consult your vet. It's really common in the States, and I just wonder if it's more common here than we think, but maybe underdiagnosed. It's spread by the same midge that causes sweet itch. And you're all familiar with how the skin is affected by the pinworm, as in the picture on the right, but check out the talk on worms if you want to know more. Ticks are nasty little beasties that can spread Lyme disease and a couple of other blood-borne diseases in donkeys, horses, dogs, and humans. The one on the left is before a blood meal, and the great fat one on the right has had its fill. And you can see one here in a horse's tail. They tend to be regional. The New Forest and Thetford Forest are famous for them. A cheap as chips tick remover for dogs is really effective. Don't just pull the tick out with your fingers, or you risk leaving those nasty mouth parts in the donkey's skin, which can result in a chronic lesion. There is a spray-on product that kills ticks, but it's only licensed for dogs and cats. You can get it through your vet if you really want to. Incredibly common, incredibly small, and incredibly distressing for our donkeys. Lice. The chewing louse mooches around eating scurf and other skin debris. The sucking louse, not so common, has sharp mouth parts which pierce the skin and suck blood for a living. They tend to be active during the colder months of the year and just love living under rugs. Whilst they cannot survive on you, they can use you as a means of transport to get to another donkey, and they will live for a day or two on rugs, wood, and bedding. They lay creamy-coloured eggs, which are fixed to the base of the hair shaft and hatch out in 2 to 3 weeks. The egg cases remain stuck to the fur, so you may see them looking like this. Not at skin level, but all the way up the hair shaft, which indicates that they've been there for ages and have grown out with the hair. And talking about seeing them, here's an owner checking for lice in her white donkey. Can you see the louse? Now can you see it at the end of the arrow? And here's one in a contrasting colour, just to illustrate why pale-skinned donkeys make it so difficult to spot lice. So my tip to you is to go to a pound shop and get yourself a pair of the strongest reading glasses. Plus 3.5 is absolutely great. Someone's actually missing a trick here. If they marketed them as lice-spotting specs in tack shops, I bet they could charge at least a tenner. And then try again, and I promise you the lice will now appear to be the size of small ants and very hard to miss. Common places for lice to live are around the shoulders, armpits, the hollows above the eyes, and around the base of the ears, all nice warm places. Just part the hair and wait. I think the lice probably stay still when first exposed, but they soon start moving, and what you're seeing is not moving scurf, but lice. Another place to find them is in the space between the lower jaw bones, and this is an impossible place for a donkey to scratch, so he may try to satisfy the itch by rubbing his face or neck. Try rubbing a damp white flannel or a big damp wad of cotton wool in this space, and you may be surprised and horrified by what comes off on it. The old donkey on the left has rubbed himself bald in places, and the Poitou in the middle was a cruelty case I was involved in, and we had to resort to clipping because he was so heavily infested. This shouldn't be undertaken lightly. This poor donkey had to be kept warm and rugged for weeks after this, even though it was in June. Bathing is actually a really good way to drown the adult lice, but be well prepared. Make sure you've got a non-perfumed baby shampoo, easy access to loads of warm water, and a sponge to wash the face and around the ears. And don't let water get into the ears. You'll also need plenty of towels and a warm day. The eggs will survive bathing, so your donkey will need an anti-lice treatment or another bath in a couple of weeks when the eggs have hatched out, but hopefully before they themselves have laid eggs. Now, don't immediately think your donkey has lice if you see a few bald patches and your donkey looks a bit moth-eaten. Donkeys don't seem to have perfected the art of molting, and they often lose what winter coat they had before growing the summer one, so they can look a bit dishevelled for a while. And let's face it, in some cases they look dishevelled all the year round, but we still love them. As you know, I can't recommend specific products, but I can say that Deosect is licensed for the treatment of both lice and flies in donkeys and horses. Like any other frequently used medication, resistance can occur, and I believe this has happened in some cases. However, don't assume that all lice are resistant to its effect, and it has the double whammy of deterring flies as well. Just be sure you read the instructions about dilution and how to handle it, because it's very powerful stuff. Another widely used product is equine nitnat, which was developed in conjunction with the donkey sanctuary and is basically tea tree oil. I've put the website address here for you if you're interested in that product. With all these products, you need to repeat the treatment after 2 weeks because the eggs are not killed by either product, so you must retreat to kill any lice that was still in the egg stage when you last treated. In the case of the blood-sucking lice, these can be killed by ivermectin wormer given orally, as the wormer gets into the bloodstream and therefore into the blood that the lice are ingesting. There's absolutely no point using an oral medication for lice that are only eating scurf, and those are the most common ones in our donkeys. No time to talk about these, but both these cancers can occur in donkeys, and the melanomas don't only affect grey donkeys any more than they don't only affect grey horses. So any black looking lumps, check with your vet straight away. Now, the reason I'm using the term skin cancer is because that's what sarcoids are. They are that serious, and I'm sure you wouldn't try home or quack remedies on yourself if you thought you had cancer. So why would you do that on your donkey? I've heard just about everything from toothpaste to beer to cure sarcoids without the vet. The key thing about sarcoids is that the earlier they're treated, the better the chance of a complete or partial cure. What starts like this may end up like this. If you don't do everything very frequently and check your donkey, little things can become really serious. And if you don't do the frequent genital groping I mentioned at the start, you could miss this, which could end up like this. Sarcoids are caused by a virus-like particle. They're very common, especially in younger donkeys, and can be found anywhere, but commonest sites around the eyes, the mouth, and the genitals. And they all start small. As soon as you spot or feel a suspicious lesion, either call your vet or take a picture and then keep taking pictures every week to see if the lesion is changing. If it's getting bigger or less flat, don't delay any longer. You can send your vet the pictures from the word go to keep him involved. We have increasing scientific evidence that they are transmissible by flies, so fly control is really essential for sarcoid control. There are lots of different treatments, from strangulating the sarcoid with a tight band, to cytotoxic creams, to anti-tumor injections, to laser removal. Each sarcoid will require an individual treatment plan, and none of them will be cheap. Laser removal is increasingly popular, and it won't matter if your own vet doesn't have a laser machine, as there are now specialist vets that will either visit the practice to carry out laser surgery or even come to your home if the sarcoid is amenable to treatment in the field. And just while we're talking skins, here are links if you want to know more about one of the biggest welfare problems affecting donkeys right now in developing countries and beyond, and the communities for whom they are a very lifeline. It makes for pretty grim reading. So, ladies and gentlemen, your donkeys are going to look to you to look after them, as far as skin is concerned. You're the very best person to keep a rigorous and routine check on this, the largest organ of the body. It's in your hands and your eyes. Now, you know, I always like to check the audience to see if you're still listening, and it looks like this time you are. So thank you very much for being here, and I'm happy to answer some questions.